Hey folks, John Ferguson Smart here. I've seen a few posts recently on LinkedIn talking about the use of examples in techniques like test-driven development, behaviour-driven development, ATDD, which is an older name for behaviour-driven development as well. And people, I think, are misunderstanding what examples represent in this context. People seem to think that examples are all there is to it. And so an example is not a very good way to represent a specification or a business rule. That examples are too limiting, that they're too narrow, that they draw you into the details too much and you can't see the bigger picture. And you know what? That's absolutely correct. Examples do narrow down your vision. They do narrow you into a particular point of view. But example-driven techniques are not just about examples. Another way you could describe them might be hypothesis-driven techniques or theorem-driven techniques, both in behavior-driven development and test-driven development. We have this idea that we start off basically with a hypothesis, with a business rule that we want to demonstrate. Does this work? How can we prove whether this works or not? And to demonstrate that rule or that behavior, what we do is we find a few examples and we also find counterexamples. So another misconception is that BDD only has happy paths. That's rubbish. You need both positive and negative examples to be able to understand the space of a problem. And so the key thing is we come up with our ideas about a specification, a business rule, a concept, a behavior that we're trying to illustrate, that we're trying to implement, and then we isolate these examples. We discover these examples and the counterexamples, and sometimes discovering examples and counterexamples, that leads to other rules and other discoveries. So it's a very creative, a very fluid process, but you need to bounce between rules or behaviors and your examples as well. You spin around and bounce between them. It's a very fluid process. So, and that happens both for BDD at the business level when you're talking with business folk, and at TDD it might be when you're pair programming with another developer. It might be your understanding of the best way to implement a solution, and you're bouncing ideas in your head. Same thing. You come up, say, right, this is the behavior I want. How would I demonstrate that? And you say, well, if we get this input, then it should produce this output. And that's your test. That's the test that you need to automate. And then you make that happen. That passes, that becomes green, and you move on to the next one. So you're always starting from a hypothesis, a rule, a behavior that you want to demonstrate. And that concept of rules plus examples, that's what we call an executable specification, both at a high level and a lower level. So it's a very clear, it's a very precise concept, this idea that we have a business rule or a behavior that we want to demonstrate, and then we have some examples and counterexamples that illustrate, that demonstrate, that prove to us that this specification has been met. So that's what I wanted to talk about this time. Thanks for listening, folks.